When my HOA's resident tyrant, Linda, kept driving over my hedge like it was her personal racetrack, I decided I'd had enough. But when I fought back, I uncovered a tangled web of corruption that would drag her from the top of the HOA hierarchy to rock bottom, costing her home, her wealth, and even her freedom. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare like this? Let us know where you're watching from, and if you've ever taken down a neighborhood bully, drop your location in the comments and share your best revenge story. I'd always known my HOA was a headache, but Linda, our self-proclaimed neighborhood overlord, took it to an entirely new level. She wasn't just a meddling neighbor. She was the type who'd fine you for breathing too loudly while flouting every rule herself. She drove a shiny, oversized SUV that she wielded like a battering ram, and for some inexplicable reason, she decided my property was her personal shortcut. It started subtly, just tire marks grazing the edge of my lawn. I brushed it off as a one-off, figuring she'd made a mistake. But then the destruction ramped up. She began plowing straight over the meticulously trimmed hedge I'd nurtured for years, flattening it under her tires. Each time I tried to replant or mend the damage, she'd strike again, always at night, always when she thought I wouldn't catch her. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. The real kicker? She had an entire street to drive on. There was no reason for her to veer onto my land except sheer arrogance. I confronted her once, standing in my yard as she rolled down her tinted window with an exaggerated huff. "Oh, chill out," she sneered. "It's just a few shrubs. Maybe if you landscaped better, this wouldn't be a problem." Then she gunned her engine and peeled out, her tires grinding what was left of my hedge into the dirt. I reported her to the HOA, expecting them to enforce their own rules, but Linda sat on the board. Complaints against her vanished into thin air. I put up a small "no trespassing" sign. She ignored it with glee. The breaking point came when I caught her SUV's bumper scraping through my flower bed, obliterating a row of tulips I'd planted, and she laughed about it while chatting with a neighbor. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to make her regret ever crossing me. Realizing the HOA was a dead end, I had to think bigger. If Linda wouldn't play by the rules, I'd turn her precious regulations against her. I called up an old friend, Tom, a professional landscaper and property assessor who'd worked in our town for decades. He knew property laws inside and out. When I explained the situation, he shook his head. "This isn't just annoying, it's a legal liability," he said. That piqued my interest. Linda's reckless driving wasn't just ruining my hedge, it was violating my property rights. We surveyed my yard, and Tom pointed out the deep tire ruts she'd carved into the soil. If she keeps this up, she could cause erosion or even destabilize your property's edge. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Now we had something concrete. Tom suggested I get an official property survey and document the damage in a legally binding way. If I could prove she was trespassing and costing me money, I could bypass the HOA and take her to court. That night, I started collecting evidence. High-resolution photos showing the trail of destruction her SUV left behind. Old snapshots of my pristine hedge for a stark before and after comparison. Tom connected me with a city planner who confirmed that ongoing vehicle damage to private property could trigger fines or force the HOA to act. Suddenly, I had leverage. Linda had dismissed me because she thought she was untouchable. But what if I could prove her actions were more than irritating? What if they were legally expensive? The gears were turning, and for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. Just when I thought I was gaining ground, fate intervened to accelerate things. One afternoon, as I set up cameras along my property line to catch Linda's next assault, I heard screeching tires followed by a loud crash. My heart sank. I bolted outside to find Linda's SUV stalled, not on my hedge this time, but against my neighbor's freshly built decorative stone wall. The collision had toppled a section, scattering bricks across the sidewalk. And then I saw the real bombshell. Linda wasn't alone. An elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, stood just feet away, visibly rattled. She'd nearly mowed them down. A small crowd of neighbors gathered, and for once, the anger wasn't directed at me. It was aimed squarely at Linda. Mr. Carter, a retired lawyer known for his fairness but no-nonsense attitude, jabbed his cane toward Linda's SUV. "This is reckless endangerment," he declared, his voice shaking with restrained outrage. "You could have killed us." Linda, true to form, scoffed, and waved a manicured hand. "Oh, please. If you don't like cars, stay inside." The crowd muttered in disbelief. Ignoring property damage was one thing. Brushing off nearly hitting an elderly couple was another. "Mr. Carter didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, announcing, "I'm calling the police, then my lawyer." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Linda's eyes. A police report meant real consequences, something she wasn't used to. Better yet, it wasn't just me fighting her anymore. The whole neighborhood had seen her arrogance laid bare, and the momentum was shifting. Linda couldn't talk her way out of this one. When the police arrived, she flipped from smug to sobbing in seconds, putting on an Oscar-worthy act. "Officer, it was just a little accident," she whimpered, batting her lashes at the stone-faced cop taking statements. "These roads are so confusing, and I was just trying to park. Save it." Officer Daniels cut her off, unimpressed. He turned to Mr. Carter, who handed over crystal-clear doorbell camera footage showing Linda's SUV barreling over the curb and into the wall. The gathered neighbors watched in silence as the truth played out on the officer's screen. Linda was caught red-handed. Daniels turned back to her, his patience thinning. "This is an offender bender. You were driving recklessly on residential property, and it looks like this isn't your first rodeo." He nodded toward my mangled hedge, the tire tracks, and the shattered wall. "This is serial property damage. We're filing a report, and you'd better call your insurance." Linda's face contorted into a scowl, but before she could argue, a new player entered the scene, Mr. Evans, the HOA president and Linda's longtime ally. He looked jittery. "Officer, I'm sure we can settle this internally," he stammered. "No need for legal action." Daniels shut him down cold. "That's not how this works. If she's got a pattern of destruction and the HOA's been ignoring it, that's a problem too." Evans blanched, realizing this wasn't just about Linda anymore. It was an HOA liability. The police documented everything meticulously. When Daniels took my statement, I detailed every instance of Linda's trespassing, the ignored complaints, and my months of evidence. He wrote it all down, treating it seriously. Then, as if on cue, the city inspector I'd contacted earlier that week about Linda's antics showed up. Surveying my hedge and the wrecked wall, he muttered, "This violates city ordinances. Someone's looking at steep fines." Linda went pale. The HOA board, sensing legal trouble, started backpedaling. The tide had turned. Linda's power was crumbling, and the people who'd shielded her were beginning to see her as a liability. She wasn't facing a slap on the wrist anymore. She was staring down real consequences, and she knew it. Linda had always leaned on her HOA clout to dodge accountability, but with the police involved, she scrambled to regain control. When her usual tricks, denial, victimhood, and bravado, flopped, she turned to the HOA rulebook she adored. If she couldn't intimidate me into silence, she'd bury me in red tape. It started small. A letter arrived citing me for unauthorized lawn modifications, the irony being that the modification was the hedge she'd demolished. The next day, another violation landed, this time for excessive lawn debris, clearly referring to the mess her SUV had made. She wasn't subtle. Several neighbors who'd witnessed her crash got similar bogus fines, all issued after they'd spoken out. The community WhatsApp group exploded with outrage. 15 years here, never a single violation, Mrs. Carter posted. Now 2 in a week? This is harassment. Linda had miscalculated. Neighbors who'd once tolerated her were now livid. One resident, Paul, an accountant by trade, dug into the HOA's finances. What he uncovered was jaw-dropping. Linda had been playing favorites with fines for years, exempting herself and her cronies while hammering others. Worse, chunks of HOA funds were missing. When Paul shared this, the board, already rattled by the police and city scrutiny, went into panic mode. They called a secret meeting, one Linda wasn't invited to. Her former protectors were now plotting to oust her. When she caught wind of it, she pushed back, but her grip was slipping. The rulebook she'd weaponized was now her undoing. HOA bylaws allowed a no-confidence vote, and signatures were piling up. Linda had terrorized us under the guise of upholding standards, but her own abuses were catching up with her. She'd set her own trap, and all I had to do was watch it snap shut. With the board turning on her and neighbors clamoring for her removal, Linda panicked. Instead of backing off or making amends, she doubled down in the worst way. She hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a sleazy, bottom-tier attorney named Mr. Holt, known for strong-arming people with baseless lawsuits. The first sign of trouble was a letter accusing me of defamation and harassment for reporting Linda's actions and documenting her damage. Other outspoken neighbors got similar threats, dripping with legalese meant to intimidate. Linda's plan was clear: bluff her way out. But she hadn't banked on Mr. Carter, the retired lawyer she'd nearly flattened. He shredded her claims, pointing out she had no case and that pushing this would expose her to countersuits. Linda, too stubborn to listen, pressed on. She demanded an HOA hearing to clear her name, even threatening to sue the board if they didn't back her publicly. They caved and scheduled it, but Linda didn't realize she'd walked into her own grave. At the hearing, she strutted in with Holt, expecting to bulldoze us. Instead, she faced a united front. Paul presented his financial findings. Thousands in HOA funds had vanished under Linda's watch, unexplained. The city inspector filed a formal complaint about her violations. Then Mr. Carter dropped the hammer. He'd requested a restraining order, citing her driving and harassment. Linda's legal threats had backfired, inviting real scrutiny. Her confidence evaporated as the evidence stacked up. Even Holt started edging away, sensing defeat. The board voted unanimously to boot her. Her power, her influence, her rulebook shield, all gone. Without that protection, she was naked to the consequences she'd evaded for years. Linda had ruled the HOA and the neighborhood with an iron grip, but she never saw her own family turning on her. Her husband, Mike, was a quiet guy who stayed out of her drama. Most assumed he was either busy working or content to let Linda run the show. But when the financial fallout hit, Mike woke up. Debt collectors started hounding them as legal fees, fines, and HOA claims piled up. Mike, thinking their finances were solid, was floored when he checked their accounts. Not only were they drowning, but Linda had emptied their emergency savings fighting her battles. Then the kicker: their insurance rejected her claims, leaving them liable for all the damages. If they couldn't pay, they faced garnishment or foreclosure. Mike confronted her in a blowout neighbors could hear from the street. He stormed out with a suitcase, and word spread that Linda had lied to him for months, minimizing the chaos she'd caused. She'd tanked their finances, their standing, and their life in the neighborhood. Mike filed for separation within days. Linda, who'd spent years lording over us, was now alone. No HOA, no money, no allies, no husband. And yet, the worst was still coming. Linda had built her empire on HOA rules, bullying anyone who didn't meet her standards. But karma was keeping score, and now her prized home, the symbol of her dominance, was slipping away. With Mike gone and their accounts frozen in the separation, Linda's finances imploded. Fines, legal costs, and settlements drained her dry. She started missing mortgage payments, ignoring notices, and letting mail stack up, as if denial would save her. Then one morning, a glaring yellow foreclosure notice appeared on her door for all to see. The neighborhood buzzed. Linda, who'd shamed others over petty landscaping flaws, was now the one with an overgrown lawn, dead flower beds, and an empty driveway, her SUV repossessed by the bank. She was tasting the judgment she'd dished out for years, with no one to blame. Desperate, she begged old HOA allies for help, but they ghosted her. Mr. Evans, her former defender, issued a public statement. The HOA was moving forward, and Linda's actions didn't reflect their values. She wasn't just losing her home. She was being erased from the community she'd ruled. The day the bank took her house, neighbors watched her pack her meager belongings and drive off in a battered rental car. No power, no home, no status, just a bitter woman with nowhere to go. For most, losing everything would be rock bottom, but Linda's arrogance wouldn't quit. Instead of fading away, she tried clawing back control, a move that would spectacularly backfire. Weeks after her eviction, rumors swirled that she was scheming to return. Some spotted her car lurking at night. Others got anonymous letters pushing to oust the corrupt HOA board. No one bought it. Linda's fingerprints were obvious. But she didn't see the storm brewing. Paul, who'd flagged the missing HOA funds, had teamed up with a lawyer and accountant. What began as a budget audit turned into a bombshell Potential fraud. Under Linda's reign, thousands had vanished, some tied to personal splurges like spa days, shopping binges, and private car services. She'd been embezzling HOA money for years. When the evidence hit the authorities, Linda was done. Police launched a criminal probe, and soon she faced charges of fraud and misappropriation. This wasn't civil anymore. It was jail time territory. Her arrest sent the neighborhood into a gleeful uproar. The woman who'd nitpicked us over trivialities was hauled off in cuffs. The trial was quick and merciless, overwhelming evidence, no allies, no defense. Convicted and sentenced, Linda lost her last shred of power. The tyrant who'd ruled us was gone, leaving only a legacy of ruin. Linda had thrived on control, but prison stripped her bare, and the real punishment was yet to come. Her arrest made local headlines as the HOA scammer, then went viral. Online forums and social media turned her into a punchline. Memes of her mugshot flooded the internet, and neighbors shared horror stories, cementing her as the quintessential Linda. Mr. Carter's quip in an interview, "She tried to ruin us, but karma had other plans," became a rallying cry. Diggers unearthed more dirt, past firings, old lawsuits, tales of HOA tyranny elsewhere. She wasn't just a local villain anymore. She was a national cautionary tale. The final blow? Mike, her estranged husband, publicly disavowed her, saying he'd had no part in her schemes and was moving on. Her family cut ties, too ashamed to face her. By her release, Linda had nothing. No home, no money, no reputation. She'd built herself up as untouchable, but now she was a laughingstock, famous for all the wrong reasons. Prison might have been a reset for some, but not Linda. Out of jail, she found no second chances. Apartment applications tanked. Landlords Googled her name and saw the HOA scandal. Jobs were a non-starter. Her record and infamy scared off employers. She tried changing her name, but the internet remembered. Bouncing between motels, she burned through her last pennies. Family wouldn't touch her. Mike had remarried and moved on. The neighborhood she'd ruled thrived without her, laughing at her reign as a distant memory. One day, she slunk back, maybe chasing nostalgia. Big mistake. Phones came out, recording her as she stared at her old house. "Hey, Linda, got any finds for us?" Someone jeered. Laughter erupted. She fled, but the truth sank in. She'd never belong anywhere again. Her story didn't end in a blaze of glory or revenge, just a slow fade into nothingness. Once a tyrant, now a nobody, Linda wandered endlessly, chasing a life she'd torched herself. To us, she was just a faded warning. Entitlement like hers always crashes hard.